All right, and welcome. This begins the quick reading session number one, and this is Jim Quick with Quick Learning. And out of all the programs that we teach here at Quick Learning, outside of the memory improvement, I think speed reading is a must-have skill in the 21st century. We're talking about the information age, and it's really the age of overload. And I want to welcome you here because you've taken the steps necessary to take your reading ability and thus your life to the next level. Now, this session is all about not only having fun, but learning the skills to not improve your reading speed, but also your reading comprehension, your reading focus, and your reading retention. And we're going to get right into it right now. And why is this skill so important? Well, I think you know since you joined this program, you know that in the modern world that we live in an age of overload, like we talked about. We live in an age of technology. We live in an age of multitasking, where I'm sure many of you are doing, wearing many, many different hats and having many different arms and legs to go different places, to do different things, to think about different things. And what this program is really about, it's about catching up, keeping up, and getting ahead. It's about mastering information overload, reducing information anxiety, because in today's fast-paced information age, we live in an age of jet planes and rockets, yet how we actually learn everything in today's knowledge economy is really horse and buggy. And that's the challenge, is that we are unprepared for information overload because there's no class that we're taught in school on how to learn. And we talk about that in the memory program. There's no class called memory or study or certainly speed reading like you're about to go through. So what this session is really about is I want to welcome you to quick reading. And quick reading, this will be, imagine you're going back and you're going back through school. This is the class that you probably would want to have taken back in grade school to take your reading to the level it really should be. And we're going to talk about what you could expect in this program. And before we get started, I want to make sure that you have a couple pieces of equipment. And really all that you need is you need a fiction hardcover book and you need a writing utensil, so a pen or a pencil, but definitely a hardcover fiction book. So if you don't have one already with you, can you please pause this and go get it? Now, if you have it, great. So we're going to get started. And what we want to start out with, and I'll tell you why we're starting out with fiction. In this program, we're going to be doing all kinds of reading. We're going to be showing you techniques on how to read technical information. We're going to give you techniques on how to read newspapers and magazines and online reading. But we're going to start with light fiction reading first, just because when you're learning a new skill, let's say like you're learning how to swim the first time out, and you're not a really strong swimmer, what the instructor probably does not want to do is throw you into the deep end of the ocean, if you will, with lots of current. So we're going to start with something light, and the reason why we do starting with a hardcover book is just generally the smaller books. If you take like the small trade paperbacks, a little bit harder to read, a little harder to keep open. So I want to help train you under optimal conditions in the beginning and then move you into a little bit more difficult reading as we progress. So what I want you to do is make sure you have this fiction book here, and ideally it's a book you haven't read yet, but for the sake of this practice, it doesn't matter as much, but ideally start with a book that you have not yet read, but you're looking forward to reading. And so when you have this book, I want you to take the pencil, and specifically if you already started reading the book, I want you to put a little mark in the margin where you're starting off. And if your book is brand new, fresh, put a little mark in the margin on the first page of the actual book where the story begins. And once you're doing that, once you finish that, we're going to get started. And we want to start with a reading assessment. A reading assessment, because we're going to give you throughout this program techniques and tips and skills and strategies on how to improve your reading speed, focus, comprehension, and retention, but how are you going to know if it works or not? And so if we always say that if you want to be able to manage something, you really need to be able to measure it. And so we want to get some kind of baseline rate. So this is your base rate that we're starting from. And how we're going to do it is, I'm always really big on letting people choose their own materials. Years ago we used to use very standardized tests and assessments. The challenge is it's not really real life applicable. If you could choose your own information that you want to read, which is what you're going to be reading anyway, it's a lot more empowering. Certainly, as you go on in one of the next sessions, we're going to talk about smart reading. Even before speed reading, you want to be able to read smart. How do you boost your retention and your comprehension of material? And even then, we ask you to bring your own reading material from your work, from your job, from your university, and real technical information. So I like when people could read their own material. So right now, you should have a hardcover fiction book and a pen or pencil, and you have it, you opened it up, and you started by putting a little mark in the margin where you're starting. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to read how you would normally read, for your full comprehension for a full 2 minutes when I say go. Okay? So when I say go, you're going to start reading for 2 minutes and just read how you would normally read. And then when you're done, I'm going to ask you to put a little mark in the margin where you left off. Okay? So you could begin now. And stop. Wonderful. So that was exactly 2 minutes. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is put a little mark in the margin where you left off. And I'm going to ask you to count the number of lines that you just read. Count the number of lines that you just read. And it counts as a line, let's say, because I understand that not every line is absolutely full. It counts as a line if it goes more than halfway across the page. But if it doesn't quite make it to the halfway mark, do not count it. And I want you to count the number of lines you just read in the past 2 minutes. Good, so you're counting the number of lines. And when you're done with that, I want you to write that number down, and I want you to divide by the number 2. Divide that number that you just counted, the number of lines, and divide it by the number 2. And you could round up if you like. And then when you have that number, I'd like you to just add a 0 to the end. A 0 to the end. So let's say, for example, you counted the number of lines in 2 minutes and you read 40 lines in 2 minutes. And then you divide by 2 and you get 20. And then you add a 0 to the end and you get 200. Okay? Now, this new number is how many words per minute that you read, because reading speed is measured in words per minute, just like typing speed. And the reason why we divided by 2 was to find out how many lines you read in 1 minute, because we timed you for exactly 2 minutes, so we divided by 2 to find out how many lines you read in 1 minute. Now, I had you add a 0 to the end to find out how many words per minute you read, because the average book has approximately 10 words per line. Okay, so again, you have that number, you're dividing by 2 because we timed you for 2 minutes and we just wanted to find out how many lines you read in 1 minute. Then I had you add a 0 to the end because it's the effectiveness of multiplying it by 10 to find out how many words per minute if your book is average has about 10 words per line. Now, obviously, if that number is, if you look at the book and it only has 8 words per line, you could just divide by 2 and multiply by 8. Multiply that number by 8 and you could have the same thing. Now, that number probably falls in the range of 200, about 250 words per minute. Now, this varies. So if you're going through this program right now with with a friend, or with a family member or coworker, you're going through this program and you're both going through it, certainly this changes. Okay, it can change depending on, like anything, depending on how awake you are, depending on your schema in terms of your background information on the material, depending on if you're multitasking, if you have stuff in your mind that you're still thinking about and not all your focus and attention was on exactly what you needed to read, how hungry you are, so different things certainly. But on average, you're going to get something in the neighborhood of 150 to about 300 words per minute. And that's what the average reading speed is. Okay, just to give you a baseline. Now, what you're about to learn in this program is about taking this number and increasing it. Now, people ask how far, what's really possible. Some people say it's, 500 words a minute, 600 words a minute, 1,000 words a minute, I think the person in the Guinness Book of World Records is 25,000 words per minute. I'm not saying any of those things. Some people make claims that it's possible to read 100,000 words per minute, literally, as fast as you could turn the pages. This program, to be completely realistic, is about just improving your reading speed, just doubling. Can you imagine if you just spent 4 hours a day reading and you could just double your reading speed and save an extra 2 hours a day? What if you could save an extra hour a day? What if you just improve your reading speed 50% and are able to save an extra hour a day, reading? They say one of the biggest time wasters out there is handling paperwork, going through emails. And if you can save an extra hour a day, that's 365 hours a year. How many 40-hour work weeks is that? That's about 9 40-hour work weeks. Most people go out, do anything just to have an extra week or 2 weeks of every year just on vacation. Imagine having an extra 9 weeks, just saving an extra hour a day. So this program is not about so much taking time as it is about helping you create more time or save time. And this program really is for you. You should get extremely excited. This program is for you if, let's say, do you have unread books on your shelf? They say that the average person, gets 90% of them don't get past the first chapter of a book, which is such a waste. So if you have unread books on your shelf, books that you went out there to buy to be able to read, this program is definitely going to help you to do it with greater speed and enjoyment. And certainly if you do it better, you're more likely to do it more often. This is for you if you have too many emails. If you get 5, 10, 20, 30. Some of you watching this, you might get 50 or more emails. How do you go through all that information and still retain it and scan through the stuff to be able to save the time but still get the information that you need? This program is for you if you're an expert in your field and you just need to be able to keep up with your industry, keep up with your job, keep up with your company, and keep up with the news and the latest current events and updates. This is something for you that if you have a growing pile of magazines, of newspapers, of periodicals, of newsletters that are just piling up. I mean, you're getting the newspaper each day and you have to recycle it before, the news actually gets dated. And so, if you subscribe to the newspaper or bring home magazines and never get a chance to really finish them, this program could definitely help you. This is for you if you have a full inbox, you have lots of mail coming in, lots of faxes that you need to be able to process and absorb and retain. And this is for you also if you just want to be able to read more and enjoy it. You go to a bookstore and you pick up these books, or especially fiction reading. Lots of times you don't see people really taking the time because they feel guilty about reading fiction, pleasure reading, because they haven't even caught up with their work reading or the work for school. And so this is definitely going to help you have greater reading enjoyment, because it's a shame that the only time you see people actually read fiction, really good fiction novels, when they're on an airplane or they're on a beach somewhere. And then lastly, I'll put this is for people who really want to catch up, keep up, and get ahead. And that's really, what this program is about. It's about practical tips and techniques and strategies to be able to have better focus, have better concentration. If your mind wanders while you're reading, you can't seem to be able to really focus and concentrate on what's in front of you. Like, you read a page in a book, you get to the end and just forget what you just read, or your mind is everywhere. Some of the things that you're going to learn here is going to help you to be able to focus your attention like a laser beam. I mean, think about like what a laser is. It's like if you have like a light bulb, just like, it's a low wattage light bulb. It could, it could fill up a room, but if you focus that energy, it could turn into a laser that could literally just burn through, a piece of paper, or a piece of wood. And that's the power, of the laser like focus. And when you think about, like maybe a magnifying glass, the light going through it, it becomes very bright. And think about what it means to be bright. It's equivalent to being intelligent, or being a genius. And the other reason why you want to be able to read is, honestly, leaders are readers. There's a picture of President JFK. He was an avid reader. He was said to have read up to 1,000 words or more. The joke is he used to read, multiple newspapers every single morning with one cup of coffee. As opposed to, most people, it takes, multiple cups of coffee to read, one newspaper. Leaders are readers. Bill Gates, very strong reader. People in the personal development field. Anthony Robbins, very very strong reader. And so leaders are readers, and the quote from Dr. Seuss: "The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go." And it's very true. And throughout human history, we have these quotes from people. The person who does not read good books has no advantage over the person who can read them. From Mark Twain, or leaders like Walt Disney. There's more treasure in books than in all the pirates' loot on Treasure Island. Because think about what a book is, at a fundamental level. I know there's lots of other readings that you do, but as if an expert takes all their knowledge and they put it into a book, on business, or on leadership, or on sales, or on health, or on relationships, or on the economy, whatever your personal interest is, somebody takes decades of information, puts it into a book, and you could sit down in an afternoon or in a few days and you could read it. You could compress literally decades into days. Where an intelligent person can learn from their own experience, a wise person can learn from other people's experience. And that's what I find, helps so much when you have the ability to read. I mean, they say the average person reads only one book a year, maybe two books a year. I mean, it's tragic. While leaders out there like CEOs could read 8, 9, 10 or more books a year. And certainly the faster you can learn, the faster you can earn also. In today's economy, where you're paid for what's between your ears, where your mental assets need to be leveraged to the utmost, knowledge is not only power, it's profit. So let's get started with this. Now that you have some kind of base rate, you have a reading speed, probably 180 words a minute, 200 words a minute, 260 words in a minute, in that range. What I want to focus on right now is that there's two parts to reading, right? There's two parts to reading: the reading speed and reading comprehension, because it doesn't make sense to have one without the other, right? I talk to people, audiences, internationally, and when I ask people about their reading, and I ask people if they've ever taken a speed reading course before, certain small, very small percentage of people actually raise their hands. And when I talk to them, I talk about to them and say that, the challenge with a lot of speed reading programs, the traditional association to most of the speed reading programs are out there, is it's not so much speed reading as it is more skipping words or scanning or getting the gist of what you read. And this program is not about that. Certainly there's a value in being able to skim, there's value in being able to scan, and in the next session, I'm going to talk about some of those skills, because sometimes you don't need to read something. Sometimes just scanning something or skimming through it is enough to meet your outcome. And that's really what it's all about. It's kind of like people ask how fast they could read. Really, it's about having flexibility, because flexibility is power. It's kind of like if you're a golfer, you don't play the whole game just with one club. You don't play with just a putter or a 7-iron, right? You have a lot of variety. So a quick reader is not someone who generally who could just read faster than everybody else. And we're going to show you how to really double your reading speed. I want to keep this completely realistic, completely real, and very relevant to you in this program. I'm not talking about reading 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times faster. I just want to help people to just read a little bit faster, because I know what power that could give you. So this program, when we're talking about reading speed and reading comprehension, it's really about comprehension. Okay, because I'm going to do a whole module just on smart reading. Even if you didn't have the speed part of it, you're going to be able to read smarter, read with better comprehension again, and retention. And we're going to go over note-taking strategies and how to memorize what you read. So I think you're going to find it unbelievably powerful, especially because if you could boost your comprehension, the speed will come. Because if you can understand more about what you're reading, certainly you could be able to go through it faster. Because if let's say you don't speak French or understand French, then you can't speed read it. You can only read as fast as you can understand. And so let's say if you have something extremely technical, will this help you? Certainly the part on smart reading will. But if you don't have a basis, a schema, a background on the information, or don't understand it, reading it faster is not going to help. Okay, so I'm about being extremely realistic in terms of what you could do. And also at the same time, I don't want to tell you what you can't do. I've had friends people that I've known that going through this program tell me stories that they've come back from the Far East, and they were meditating for months, and they come back and they're able to look at a page in a book and just completely absorb it. And just so who knows the power of the human mind. What I'm here to say is what's realistic right now is to improve it 50%, 100%. And then from there, you can certainly build from there. And so there's 2 parts of reading. There's reading speed and reading comprehension. And it's not about scanning or skipping words or some of the myths out there on speed reading. There's a Woody Allen quote that said, "I took a speed reading course and read War and Peace in 20 minutes. It involves Russia." And what a comedian Woody is to be able to say that, and it's true. A lot of people who have gone through speed reading programs, and I recommend all of them, because I think you can learn from everything and everybody. That nobody can be completely wrong, and that everybody serves as an example or some kind of warning. But there's something we can learn from everybody, especially children. Being organic, natural learners as they are, be able to learn like a foreign language or a musical instrument. Part of what I'm going to teach you today is organic learning, and just really getting to a common sense corner of our brain, saying like, what makes sense to me. So a big part of what we're going to be doing here, just like we do in the memory program, for those of you who've taken the quick recall program, is not so much learning, but it's really unlearning and getting rid of those bad habits and adopting new habits that we should have learned probably when we're about 10, 11 years old. And that's really where it begins, where children really start to really understand more and comprehend what the literal meaning is of what they're reading. So let's get to it. I want to start first for people. I want to give you 5 obstacles that keep you from being a quick reader. 5 obstacles that really get in the way of you reading faster, or get in the way of your enjoyment, or get in the way of your focus, or get in the way of your comprehension. And so you could write these down, as notes, or obviously you have them here. And I'll go through this really quickly because I want to get to solutions. The first